Tombstone Tommy here. So today's video is going to be the theme of my next chapter, and the theme is judgment and why we shouldn't do it. Thou shalt not judge. Well, you see, what happens is when we judge, we generate judgment within our body, and that judgment is a direct reflection of whatever it is we are projecting out onto the world, i.e. she's fat, he's ugly, she's a so-and-so, he's an asshole, and all these sort of things. So every time we pass judgment like that, we are generating the energy of those words and feelings. So when we go, he's this and she's that, well, we've already generated the thoughts, we've transmuted the thoughts into energy, which we want to, she's ugly, he's an idiot, and all these sort of things. Well, it's already in here, isn't it? It's stemming from in here. You see, in the Bible, Jesus is reputed to have said, first remove the rafter from your own eye before you cast judgment on another person. And then, those of you who have not sinned, cast the first stone. And so we see that we're all sinners, and so we shouldn't be casting stones. And none of us are perfect, and so we shouldn't be expressing our judgment towards another person. But most fundamentally and importantly, what I've discovered about this is when we stop passing judgment, then we emancipate ourselves from those energies. Because when we pass judgment, then there's an energy pertaining to all of those judgments, and we're filled with those energies. And usually those energies are destructive, they're demeaning, they don't offer any support or benefit to anybody. And so, if at the very least we don't get a direct rebound from those judgments, if we opine openly our judgments to another person, then we leave ourselves very vulnerable, don't we, to receiving a similar or accentuated energy in return, just like playing verbal tennis. It's destructive, there's no benefit to it whatsoever, and invariably it would end in tears. And so why would anybody want to engage in that? Initially, when we're younger, we do engage in these things because we have to learn. And when we are on the receiving end of judgment and we realise it doesn't feel very nice, and that in itself generates an energy, when somebody says something about us, and you feel the energy, don't you? Ooh, all of a sudden there's an energy within you, and it's not a nice feeling. And you know, we're all aware of many celebrities, let's say, people who are in the public eye, and even if they are wholesome, good people, there are always a section of society who want to try to destroy them. And this is the proverbial devil, of course, wanting to seek out and just destroy good. And so it's unavoidable. But if we don't take those energies on board, if we don't accept those energies, if we just let them pass through us straight away without attachment, pass over us, under us, whatever, then we don't feel these energies taking their toll upon us. And so I'm often speaking about Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson has been through a great deal, and he is attacked vehemently by the postmodernists because the postmodernists find him an obstruction to their goals, and so they go at him tooth and nail. And the postmodernists, they're completely unreasonable, and there's no rationality to their attacks or to whatever they say. It's just an emotional expression, and this is why, you know, the variety are just screeching and screaming, trying to get their own way with no rational application as to why they should be given their own way. And so we can all be subject to judgment, so we know what it's like, and so invariably most of us are smart enough not to do it. But what I'm speaking about now is going a little bit deeper than the recognition of what it feels like, because not to judge your fellow man is very important in the Bible, and it's one of God's requests not to judge another man. I ask myself, well, why would it be God's request? Why doesn't God like judgment? Seems to me that he was very judgmental himself in the New Testament. Sorry, the Old Testament. The Old Testament pertained to Jehovah. New Testament pertained to Christ. And so it was filled with judgment against the chosen people and homosexuals and lazy people and, you know, the 7 deadly sins. It was filled with judgment. So you could say, well, okay, it's all right for God because maybe he doesn't suffer the ramifications of human judgment and there's nobody to judge him. But he highly recommended that it wasn't something that we should engage with. And when you think about that, you go, oh, look, if God wants us to be pure, he doesn't want us to sin in any shape or form. And judgment is a sin. It's a variety of sinning. Because it pertains to hate. And lots of other variety of negative connotation. So what he, in his wisdom, knows is that when we do engage in judgment, we then generate that energy pertaining to that judgment in our bodies. And we are not pure. We are tainted. We're defiled. And if there's someone working in your office or anybody that you know, and you're like, you see what's happening? Your teeth are gritted, your jaw's all tight, you've got a frown on, and you're casting aspersions and, you know, negative energies and this, that and the other. You're generating that all to yourself, and you're not feeling blissful, are you? But if you just accept how the other person is or the people are, and you go, people are people, you know, we're all different, and I'm sure I've got my faults, and if people look at me then they want to, you know, express themselves in a certain way because they think I'm X, Y and Z. But if we free ourselves of those judgments, then we free ourselves of the energy, and that then enables us to be more pure, and that's the essence of God, purity. And so this whole book that I'm writing, How to Know God, is the avenues of what we take as human beings, the rationale behind the things that we should do and shouldn't do. And what we find is, regardless of whether there is such a thing as God, all of the things we're asked to do are beneficial to us as human beings. Thou shalt not, you know, the commandments. Well, of course they're all beneficial, aren't they? You know, let the person who hasn't sinned cast the first stone. Well, nobody should be casting stones. Remove the rafter from your own eye before you pass judgment on the straw in another man's. Well, if we adhered to all of those requests, then you could see that we would live in complete harmony. And thus we would be creating heaven here on earth. And so I experienced this very, very powerfully at a certain time in my life, when I was in the vicinity of deep sinners, there was something that washed over me which didn't allow me anymore to pass judgment. Because I realised profoundly that we're all sinners, and it doesn't matter how purer than thou we consider we are, and how much good we do. And we could be 99% good, but of course there's always that speck of yin in the yang and yang in the yin. And so we're never immaculate. You know, there's only ever been one immaculate human being, or at least a notion of that. And so therefore, we have to realise that we are all the same variety of creature. We're all capable of the same things or very similar things. So there is an evil lurking within us all. And one of the sayings of Alexander Solzhenitsyn was that evil runs through the heart of every man. This is what he discovered when he was in the Russian gulags. That people who were his family members and neighbours and close friends could very, very easily turn coat on their friends and family just to save their own skins, or to receive favour with the opposition. Cowards, you know. And so he looked at what he considered were previously good, God-fearing people, and discerned that even in those people he could find evil. And so therefore he concluded that evil runs through the heart of every man. And if that's the case, and of course it is, because there is always a parameter which we will cross over given certain circumstances. And when we are all tried and tested, then we will see that there is a realm where we're going to fail. And so when we realise this, then all of a sudden it's kind of like all of our judgment is washed away, and we become much more accepting of our fellow man. And as soon as we do that, then there isn't any problems anymore. And when we are in very close proximity to people and they are so annoying and they're any number of things, if you just accept and let whatever is bothering you wash over you, because at the end of the day, whatever is bothering you is something which there is a deep-rooted reason as to why. And if this person just is X and this person just Y and Z and you know, all these people, well, when we look at whatever it is we don't like, we'll find that maybe it's because we don't like those traits in ourselves. And so we don't want to be reminded of ourselves and how on previous occasions, and probably on still some you know, recent occasions, we would fail ourselves, and we would become the people that we are hating upon. And so it's a very profound thing when we realise the root of judgment, and we realise how emancipating it is when we no longer partake in it. And so I'm going to be writing this chapter on the power of judgment and non-judgment, and also I'll tag on it and continue with the chapter. I think the chapter probably will be titled, you know, Judgment and Acceptance, because they're two sides of the same coin. Because if we don't pass judgment and we find acceptance, then again our lives become so much more simple. if we're in an environment that potentially can rile us and get us agitated, if we find that Buddhist acceptance, then we will live in the greatest of peace. We will find ourselves in the eye of the storm, where it is still. And all the chaos can be going on all around us, and it bothers us not anymore, because we are still. But if we are part and parcel of the whirlwind, caught up in the vortex of chaos, then we are going to be highly participant in it. But if via our non-judgement state and our acceptance, we then find ourselves placed within the centre of the chaos, and we are just observing without participating in the emotions. And so I look at those two concepts and human traits, and I go, well, if we have more acceptance and less judgment, then we are vastly more balanced than we would be if we didn't. And when we do participate in the finer qualities of what it is to be a human being, then we notice that our minds are less chaotic and our hearts are more still. And so then we see that, well, God wants us to have pure hearts and a stillness. Be still and know that I am God. Because when we are still, that's then when we feel the pinnacle of human existence. When our bodies, minds and bodies are absolutely still, we enter into the state of nirvana, which is Buddhist heaven. And so we see then that the psychology of those scriptures is all premised in enabling the human being to find that most beautiful of resting states. And when we love thy neighbour, and we don't judge, and we accept, and we love, and we're kind, and we do all these things, then more and more we are creating heaven within ourselves. And if we are all creating heaven within ourselves, then that then expands onto the whole of the human race. And if it was ever possible for us all to be Jesus-like, then we could see what a utopia it would be here on earth. It would actually be the Garden of Eden. And the whole biblical allegories of heaven and hell are simply states of the human mind. Because when we participate in all of the things that we are commanded and recommended not to, then we are actually in the realm of Satan. Our whole existence pertains to hell, and is a very agitating and unsettling personal environment, isn't it? But in the opposition, when we are doing all the things that we know we should and we're asked to, then we find ourselves in the height of the human potential, and it really is a beautiful place. And so when we're reading all this stuff and we haven't experienced these things and we haven't analysed ourselves whilst we have been participating in all these things, we cannot make manifest the energy from the words into a state of being. We need to have felt all these things. We need to be able to make an assessment between one and the other, to see the viability, the veracity, the efficacy of what is being said in the Bible. And when we then have experience in life and we concentrate closely upon Scripture and we apply our human psychology and reasoning into the Scriptures without having this dismissive nature of I don't believe in God. Because all what I'm saying, people, in my book and in my videos, it doesn't matter whether you believe in God or not. And recently, in my last chapter, I'm speaking about belief and faith and hope, and then I'm concluding, well, at the end of the day, you can supplant all these notions and concepts with just one, and that is of love. Because if we don't participate in any of the negative realms, and if we only generate love within ourselves, and we only feel love for other people and the world, and we are so grateful for our existence and, you know, our current health, whatever level it is, could always be worse, then we find ourselves in the realm of the best possible human experience. And so then we can see the metaphor of heaven and hell. There really is something to it, because potentially we are hell and we are heaven. And so throughout all of the chapters which I've been writing, I've been applying my acquired wisdom, knowledge, experience in assessing what really are these Scriptures about? What is religion about? Why do we have these concepts and notions as human beings? It's a self-protection mechanism. That's what it is. People in the bygone years, smart people, have considered that if we live in a certain way, then we would greatly benefit from it. And so, therefore then, allegories were created, and Jesus mostly speaking in illustration. And some of the disciples said to Jesus, "Sire, why do you speak in illustration to these people?" And he says, well, because they are not all capable of grasping the straightforward language of what it is that I'm trying to convey. And so it's easy to speak to people without the greatest of intelligence and experience in illustrations, in simple terms, and using allegories, because they can be remembered and passed on much more easily. It's not everybody that has a very clinically inclined analytical mind that can observe how we are as creatures. Most people have no self-awareness. They have little awareness about anything. And so, to speak in simple terms was the way forward. Now, bearing in mind, you see, the simplicity of the Bible, it's also very complex, of course. It's written for different levels, like most movies. Whenever you go to see a Walt Disney movie, don't ever get thinking that those movies are for kids, because they are equally for adults, because they are written on two levels. There's always two levels to one of these movies, and there's all the information in there for the child to perceive, but also there has to be intrigue and value in that movie, because it is the parents that have got to go and sit through these movies to take their children to them. So if Walt Disney and Disneyland and I don't know, whatever production you've got, want to attract the children, they have to entice the adults. And in actual fact, it's probably more that they entice the adults to come back and revisit their childhood because it's so much fun, and they want to do it more than their kids. And they go, come on, let's go to Disneyland, you'd love it. But really, they're going to be loving it, because to go back with license to experience what it was like as a child, and to act childlike, and to be in the realm of that childlike innocence and fun, then it's a great relief from everyday life. And so these Walt Disney movies are very, very intelligent how they're written, and they are filled with innuendo. The innuendo goes over the head of the children, and mostly the sexual innuendo, you know, but it's received by the parents, and so it's stimulating for them. And so, goodness me, I don't know what it is about this place. I don't know, maybe it's around these tombstones, these creepy tombstones. I think it's this shirt, actually. Yeah, it's this nylon shirt. Usually I wear a cotton shirt. These ones are nylon, they're just bloody itching all the time. But what a beautiful little environment. Check this out. Hello, matey. He's been a long time gone. And I particularly love the vines, the ivy growing over the old tombstones. And, you know, they're a little bit chipped where, you know, bits have fallen off, and, you know, some of them are slanting, and all the writing's becoming faded, and, yeah. And over there, you've got all these slate tombstones lined up on the wall, with all the creepy ivy growing over. But I never feel an ounce of morbidity when I'm in these places. I just don't think of the death. For me, these places are filled with life because of the stillness and of the lack of human energy. You can listen to all the birds and all the nature. And early in the morning, it's kind of about 9 AM now or something like that, then there's much more activity with the birds before the heat of the day rises. And we can observe the stillness. The leaves now, they're absolutely still. Only when you look long enough, you can see. It's just a little bit of breathing. And that's hypnotic, people. That puts you in a trance. And this is why being out in nature, stilling the mind, is exceedingly beneficial. And so I'm going to be, well, I think I'll actually sit here and I'll read my book. But, you know, I come most mornings to this place. I used to come into the graveyard just over the wall, until I bought myself a chair. And I thought, well, I don't want to be over there because there's people walking around, and there's always some maintenance going on, you know, groundsperson's maintenance. And so in here, the guy comes in to trim and mow these lawns once a fortnight. And other than that, there's nothing going on. And so my apartment is just over there. That isn't actually my apartment, but it's in the same block. Mine's just a little bit further over the wall. So it's super near. All the old sticks, they sit out in the grounds of that apartment. And there's a bit of sun at a certain part of the day between the trees. And they all get their deck chairs out and everything, and they sit there. There's about 4 of them. And they're there for a couple of hours, and then they work themselves slowly down, sitting on their chairs in the car park, because that's where the sun is. And it's entirely unpleasant. And I just say, I'm going in my garden. This is full of nature. and it's beautiful, and the grass is lovely and lush and soft. And they're like, oh, oh, oh. They wouldn't ever dream of it. So I'll be beginning that chapter today, and I don't think it will take anything like as long as the last chapter, because the last chapter was the greatest of struggles, because those concepts were very deep and profound, and you can look at them from so many perspectives. And I'm still not settled in my mind. There's a cloudiness there, because the unconscious is fermenting something. And so I've left that chapter, and I'll leave it for a week or two. And every now and again I just write a note down of something which I need to address. And then I'll go back with fresh eyes and read it through, and then I'll make amendments. And that's the process of book writing. It's something that everybody does. Because in the first draft, you can never express all that you want to express. Basically, you put the blueprint down, and then you read over it and lots of times. And when you do that, then you go, oh, I'm just going to change this wording. I'm just going to make that a little bit more easy to understand, and I'm going to add this bit to it, and I'm going to summarize and conclude a bit more clearly, and so the whole process of writing a book is straightening your own mind. It's a defragmentation process. So on the computer, you set the computer to defrag, and you can see that everything is being put in order, and it's making all these noises, and as it's what a defrag is, it's like if you picture a library and there has been an earthquake and all the bookshelves are falling over and the books are all over the place and it's absolute chaos, and the librarian comes in and goes, oh my God, where am I going to start with this? But the beauty of it is what it does is it gives the librarian an opportunity to know where exactly every single one of the books are, and to make sure that they're all in the precise order. And then when there's any books that are destroyed and they're not suitable for the public, then they can be taken out, or they can be repaired, or whatever. And then by the time the library is back in order, it's in a very perfect state and condition, and books can be found much more easy than they could before. And you see, what happens is when people pull a book out of this genre and then they can't be bothered to put it back and they stick it in another one, well, all that is eliminated and it's all put back into a higher level of perfection. And so that's what happens when you write a book, because you have to make sure that every single book is in order and in sequence, and that you've read all these books. That's the thing also. It's kind of like the librarian has read every single one of the books in the library, and so has this enormous amount of information, knowledge within. And then when speaking to people, if people ask you a question, all you do is, as a librarian, you just go and you go to a certain section, a certain genre, and then you go to a certain author and you pick out that book and you go, that's the answer. Of course, you're not parrot fashioning other people's information. That's your information. Every one of those books is a metaphor for your knowledge and experience. And so that's how I see it, and it's a beautiful, emancipating, liberating feeling, because by the time you've organized your own mind, then you can relax and you're free. And you see, I think the main reason why I am writing this book is because that's what I'm doing. It's my own therapy. For starting out 13 years ago, on my spiritually awakening path, going through the dark night of the soul, depression, and having a myriad of downloads and experiences. Well, what I've done now, well, I'm halfway through it, probably halfway, is that I've put them all into chronological sequence, and I've settled in my own mind and heart that I have imparted all of the information which is relevant. And so what I'm considering is, by the time I've written that book, then my mind is completely defragged and it's pure, and then I will be closer to God, because I would have addressed all of the realms in my philosophy that I wasn't sure of. I haven't concluded as much as I would like to have concluded. And so by the time I've done it, then I will have a very good handle on what I have concluded throughout all these years of experience, and I'll know where I am with it. And then when someone says to me, do you believe in God, or what do you think about heaven, or what do you think about hell, or what's your take on the concept of faith and acceptance and non-judgement and a whole myriad of other things, then because I have made it perfectly plain in my own mind, painstakingly writing each sentence down and changing it and restructuring it, all these things, well, then you can sit before an audience of educated, qualified people in these realms, and they could ask you questions, and then you could give them a satisfying answer, because you would actually know what you're speaking about. And so it's like putting the cherry on the cake of my sojourn into the supernatural. And I don't say that meaning that in any way it's been concluded, because it's going to go on and on and on. It goes on every day, every hour of the day. There's some new revelation, and it's so beautiful. But I just felt that now's the time to at least put that to rest, to put all of this knowledge and feelings and the emotions of it, everything, just put it into a book. And that way I will receive catharsis, the purification of my own mind and body, and the satisfaction of knowing that, to the best of my ability at this moment in time, I have satiated my quest and inquiry into how to be closer to God, which is to say, how to be closer to the nature of what I am, because we're all shards, chips off the old block, and to know one, you know them all. And so when I'm working on understanding this thing, this experience, I'm also understanding the experience of all other humans. And so it's very, very beneficial in many, many ways. And so that's where I am at this moment in time, people. And listening to me, all I suggest that you do is just to reverse. Instead of watching me, you sit yourself in my position, which is your position, and you reflect upon all of your own knowledge and experience. And even if you didn't want to go public with anything, if you started to write your own spiritual autobiography, then you'd see also that there is a great deal of fruit to be harvested and reaped, and you become much richer for having done that. So back to my book.